Chapter 4. The Hidden Agenda. The sky was overcast as Daniel Thorne stepped out of his apartment and onto the bustling streets of New York City. A chill wind whipped through the towering buildings, and the scent of rain hung heavily in the air. Daniel zipped up his jacket and pulled his collar closer as he made his way toward the subway station. The interview with Luther Kane had left a sour taste in his mouth. Control and the greater good. The words echoed ominously in his mind. Despite his smooth rhetoric, Kane had revealed a glimpse of his true intentions. As Daniel descended the steps to the subway, his phone buzzed with a new message from Maryam al-Saeed. "Check out the new defense budget proposal. Follow the money." Back at his apartment, Daniel sifted through the recently published defense budget proposal on his laptop. The data was complex, dense with bureaucratic jargon and hidden clauses. After hours of digging, he found a curious detail. A significant portion of the proposed budget was allocated to a new strategic initiative named Project Unity. He pulled up the records of the Senate Appropriations Committee, where the budget had passed unanimously. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the list of names. Nearly all of the committee members had recently received large campaign donations from Kane's network of corporations. He jotted down the committee members' names and cross-checked them against Kane's public financial disclosures. The connections were striking. Every single senator on the committee had direct or indirect financial ties to Kane. But it didn't end there. Daniel expanded his search to include members of Congress. He traced campaign contributions, lobbying activities, and private meetings, uncovering an elaborate web of influence. By the time he finished, he had a list of over 50 senators and congressmen with clear financial links to Kane's network. He compiled his findings into a neat report and arranged to meet Maryam at a secluded coffee shop in Brooklyn the next day. "It's bigger than we thought," Daniel said, as he slid the report across the table. Maryam's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. "He's bought them all," she muttered, her voice filled with disbelief. "And this Project Unity, what is it?" "I don't know yet," Daniel admitted. "But it has a huge chunk of the defense budget, and Kane's fingerprints are all over it." Maryam tapped her finger on a page outlining Kane's campaign donations to key senators. "We need to find out what they're planning," she said firmly. "There's got to be a paper trail somewhere." "The defense contractor," Daniel suggested. "If Kane is behind Project Unity, then the contractor handling the project must be one of his companies." Maryam nodded thoughtfully. "All right," she said. "Let's dig into this contractor." After hours of cross-referencing and researching, Daniel and Maryam found their lead. Omega Defense Systems, a subsidiary of Kane's multinational conglomerate, New Dawn Holdings. The company had been awarded the contract for Project Unity just a month before the budget proposal was released. Daniel's next step was to find someone inside Omega Defense Systems who could shed light on the project. "Meet me at the Irish pub on 47th Street tomorrow," Maryam said as they parted ways. The pub was dimly lit, and the murmur of conversation filled the air. Daniel found Maryam at a corner table, nursing a pint of beer. Across from her sat a nervous-looking man in a rumpled suit. "Daniel," Maryam greeted him as he approached. "This is Jim Carruthers, a former engineer at Omega Defense Systems." Daniel shook Jim's hand and sat down. "Jim left Omega a few weeks ago," Maryam explained. "Tell him Tell him what you told me." Jim glanced around nervously before leaning in close. "Project Unity is a weapons system," he said softly. "A global surveillance network combined with a rapid deployment strike force. It can track individuals, identify potential threats, and eliminate them within minutes." "And Kane's behind this?" Daniel asked. Jim nodded. "New Dawn Holdings owns Omega," he replied, "and Kane has been funneling money into Project Unity for years." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. So he's setting up a surveillance state, he muttered. But why? To start wars, Jim said grimly. Project Unity will give Kane the power to destabilize entire regions and control the global narrative. He's setting the stage for something big. Miriam opened her laptop and pulled up the classified documents Sofia Ramirez had provided. Sophia mentioned the second seal, she said, scrolling through the files. A global war orchestrated by Kane. She stopped at a memo marked Top Secret and read aloud. Strategic objectives for Project Unity. Destabilize Middle Eastern regions, provoke conflict in Eastern Europe, and create unrest in Africa. Ensure global instability to pave the way for a new world order. It's all there, Daniel said, shaking his head in disbelief. Kane's plan to bring the world to its knees. He jotted down notes as Jim continued explaining Project Unity's capabilities. The more he learned, the clearer Kane's vision became. He's building a surveillance state, Jim concluded, and he'll use it to start a war that will make the world beg for peace. And the mark? Daniel asked. Miriam pulled out a diagram of the mark of Kane. He'll offer peace, she said, but only to those who bear his mark. Anyone who refuses will be left to fend for themselves. Jim leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Kane has already secured the loyalty of over 50 senators and congressmen, he said. With their support, he can pass any laws he needs to enforce the mark. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the weight of the revelation sinking in. And the prophecy? He asked Miriam. She opened her Bible to Revelation 13 and read aloud. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast. She flipped to the next page and continued. Then another horse went out, a fiery red one, and its rider was given permission to take peace from the earth so that people would slaughter one another. And he was given a great sword. The second seal, Daniel muttered. War. Kane is the beast, Miriam said softly, and he's about to unleash the second seal. Jim stood and glanced around nervously. I need to go, he said. If Kane's people find me, you'll be fine, Daniel assured him. We'll keep you safe. Jim nodded, then slipped out the back door, disappearing into the night. What now? Miriam asked. Daniel stared at the classified documents on the table, his mind racing. We need to find more allies, he said finally. People who still believe in free will and the greater good. Back in his apartment, Daniel poured himself a whiskey and sat down with the Bible Miriam had given him. He flipped to Revelation 13 and read aloud. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? He poured himself another drink and stared out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the darkness. Free will and faith in good, he whispered to himself, trying to convince himself. But as he closed the Bible, he couldn't help but wonder if faith alone would be enough. The next day, Daniel received an urgent call from Miriam. Daniel, they found Jim, she said breathlessly. He's dead. What? Daniel exclaimed. How? His body was found in an alleyway near his apartment, Miriam replied. It was made to look like a robbery, but I know Kane's people are behind it. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. What do we do now? He asked. We run, Miriam said firmly. Kane's people will come after us next. Within the hour, Daniel packed a small suitcase and met Miriam at a bus station on the outskirts of the city. We need to lay low for a while, Miriam said as she scanned the crowded terminal. I know a safe house in upstate New York. They boarded a bus headed north, the tension palpable as they watched the city fade into the distance. When they finally arrived at the safe house, a small cabin nestled deep in the woods, Miriam collapsed onto the couch, her eyes filled with tears. "Jim didn't deserve this," she muttered, burying her face in her hands. "He just wanted to do the right thing." Daniel sat beside her, unsure of what to say. "We're going to stop Cain," he said finally. "We'll expose him for what he really is." Miriam looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "But how?" she asked. "He's too powerful." Daniel opened the Bible and flipped to Matthew 24. "Jesus said that false prophets will rise," he read aloud, "and deceive many, but he also said that the Son of Man will come like lightning and gather his elect from the four winds." He looked up at Miriam. "If Cain is the Antichrist, then Christ will return soon," he said softly. Miriam nodded slowly. "In Islamic prophecy," she explained, "the return of Isa will mark the beginning of the end for the Dajjal." She picked up a hadith and read aloud. "The Son of Mary will descend at the white minaret in the eastern side of Damascus, wearing 2 garments lightly dyed with saffron, placing his hands on the wings of 2 angels. Every non-believer who will smell the odor of his breath shall die, and his breath will reach as far as he can see." Daniel felt a glimmer of hope. "Then we're not alone," he said. "If we can expose Cain, people will see him for what he really is." Miriam closed the hadith and placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder. "We will stop him," she said firmly. "Together."